Hello, everybody, and welcome to this. This is the second episode of the Psychology of Lockdown series that I'm producing, working here with George Roche of the Line International. He has come on now. We've done one episode about mystification, which was the larger idea, and now we're going to go into a lot of the different concepts, just bit by bit. What happens to people that have been raised in a situation where they've been traumatized into basically being satisfied with living under an authoritarian system where they've been separated from their own ability to engage in critical thinking. We're trying to do this in-depth series concerning why people are having such a difficult time engaging in conversation about the lockdown when you go against the official narrative. So today we're talking about magical thinking. George, what do you think about magical thinking?
I think it's magic.
Yep.
There's a lot of magic that people miss generally. Most of the words are very telling. When we're speaking about magical thinking, it shows up in the words. And most of us, if not all of us, have experienced what magical thinkers sound like, although we don't in the moment realize some of the distortions. So magical thinking is notable for family words, what we call family words: all, every, never, always. Mm-hmm. Those kind of words are distorted. We have to challenge the person to get down to the real experience they're trying to have. Now, all children absolutize, okay? They don't see things in abstract terms. They're more linear, black and white, right or wrong, for me or against me. There's no middle ground. There's no gray area, in other words. So a hallmark trait of a magical thinker is all or nothing thinking. This planet's going down the tubes is nominalization, where the person sees the entire planet with a problem, not just parts of the planet with a problem. Or my car is a piece of junk. There's another normalization where the entire car, not just the brakes, but the subject to question. So these distortions give people a very new way of relating to others. They're either more than human, given, be a failure, be a slob, or more than human. I'm perfect. Both of those poles are meant to solve the same conflict within the magical thinker, which is the shame-based identity that we have referred to in a couple of our interviews. So when we talk about magical thinking, what we're actually referring to is a person who has not entered full psychological birth. There have been obstructions along the way in their social development that cause them to have conflicts with people because they don't see things in truthful or concrete terms. So an example today for the lockdown would be something like Doug Ford just came out with this amazing magic where he changed the lockdown date from the 24th to the 26th, abracadabra. Remember, we're in imminent danger, big issues right now in our province. However, we're going to change the date from the 24th to the 26th. The magical thinker comes in and says, great leadership, Doug. No question about why this sudden change. How can he do this so arbitrarily and without the advice of all the professionals chiming in on this state of emergency that places us in imminent danger were we not to obey the rules? This is magic. The snap of a finger, this occurs. So the person who we describe as not being fully psychologically born, they're still stuck somewhere, arrested somewhere in the childhood developmental process, is not going to ask the obvious questions that are in front of him or her that shows that they're paying attention to the actions of the person who is giving them the information, in this case, Premier Doug Ford. in Ontario, the Premier of Ontario. He's changing things up, and rather than people saying, "Wait a minute, I thought we were in imminent danger. We have a serious problem here." I guess not, because you have suddenly changed the date. We have no scientific basis for why you've made that decision. Where's the wiggle room coming from? There is no critical thinking involved. It's black or white.
Do you think that applies to like the mask wearing too, where all people have to wear masks or else, coronavirus is going to spread and kill us all? Or, all businesses have to apply to this lockdown. If one business is open, where they're just applying these rules to everybody instead of just themselves, actually. I mean, this is something I've been kind of thinking about a lot lately, is our personal health choices should be our own. But people have this tendency to want to apply these solutions to everyone, and everyone needs to do how I think, or everyone needs to do what the authority figure's telling us, or else it's not going to work, and everybody's going to die.
Well, that's interesting, because remember, magical thinking came from authoritarian socialization. When you're told what to think, what is approved of, what is disapproved of, what is okay as an idea and what is not okay as an idea, you begin to develop alternatives in the conversation that allows you to be accepted. So you begin to develop excuses. Now, after you have played this game for a few years, you've lost touch with concrete, specific data, and you've now replaced it with the magical ideology, what I mentioned earlier, all or nothing thinking. Mm-hmm. They said it, I better think about it. Don't question anything, just believe the narrative, and you shall be okay. So this idea where a person doesn't have that abstract ability, the flexibility to say, I've got to analyze this information so that I can see what's right for me. In other words, the information stored in memory should be questioned when new information is received. That information compares against already stored data in the human brain, and if what that data says is more logical, more useful and necessary and appropriate than what a person has been believing, then the amendment to the current information should be made. But all too often that amendment is not made. And the reason it's not made is because the child is not capable of making an amendment according to the new information. They are still relying on the old magical beliefs from many years ago to navigate themselves through the information. This is ingrainment.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because, here we are in California where we've been in lockdown forever, basically, and we've been wearing masks forever, and now things are worse than they've ever been. We've had the World Health Organization coming out and saying the lockdowns are worse, shouldn't be the priority way to respond to the coronavirus because of all the damage that it's doing economically. And they've also been saying that the PCR tests are oversensitive. So we're getting all this new information, even from the World Health Organization, and nobody's changing their minds. Nobody's looking at the situation, and we're not moving along and changing the way we're dealing with this. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's this magical thinking that the ideas that the authority had back in March, we just need to be doing it more. We need to be doing it harder,
Well, that's interesting. No. And one of the biggest tricks they've pulled on us, speaking of magical thinking, is that we are expected to believe that the PCR test, which produces many more false positives than truer positives, and we're still getting people to believe that testing is the answer to sussing out who is and who isn't ill with corona. And remember, we still don't have a purified, isolated virus to even refer to in the first place. So a lot of the magic we're seeing right now that, again, the child inside the adult is buying into, we're seeing all this theater going on around the evidence. The evidence is clear. Most people are latching on to this. They're starting to realize this is not about a virus. Yet some people are going, fancy, that PCR test is really teaching us that our numbers are growing. Things are getting worse.
Right.
Walk it down, batten down the hatches, close the dental offices and the schools and the stores, yet Walmart and Costco are still packed. Isn't that interesting? Now, that is some kind of magic. When they can fool us right in front of our eyes. Now, there's nothing ambivalent that Costco is still open, but the mom and pop stores, if you're found to be open, you're getting a ticket. We will close you down.
And so relate this back, this concept of ingrainment, it happens in childhood. Like if we're talking about the government as the authority figure, why is that triggering people? What happened to them, you think, in childhood that makes them respond to what the authority is telling them now, using this ingrainment where when the new information comes in, this magical thinking, the new information comes in, now they won't change. What happened to that person as a child that makes them as an adult not have the flexibility to change with the new information?
Getting back to the parent tapes, the set of rules that we have been raised on, all of us, are ingrained because we heard them repeatedly as children. What I say goes. Or, these are the do as I do, not as I say parents. We have all this hypocrisy going on. We have all these politicians telling us you got to wear masks, you have to wear masks, and then we see them out for dinner not wearing masks, or in other environments, maskless, yet they want our police to hand us fines.
Right.
So there's a significant amount of hypocrisy, contradictory behavior, which illuminates this magic that's in front of us. Remember, they told us we are in imminent danger, yet they're not even following their own principles and rules. Now, to the ingrainment of the socialization with the magical thinkers of today, they're not going to pick up on that. They're still obeying the parent tapes. The automatic thoughts of so many years ago is still running the show. They haven't made the amendment. They haven't made the shift.
Right. Right.
Where,
the shift to individuation where they're making just decisions for themselves and they have the flexibility to change as the information changes.
So the ingrainment means the child inside continues to believe the rules despite obvious evidence to the contrary of the belief. They ignore this information. It's the same thing as talking to people on Facebook who challenge the truth, the truthfulness of your statement, the scientifically supported statement. And when you ask them to produce evidence to the contrary, well, they can't do anything. See, this is less than human. When being less than human, you can't expect me to answer. You can't expect anything from me, which is the different way of saying I don't have anything to challenge with any validity what you have just said. So again, magical people, it's all or nothing. They believe just by getting married will solve all their problems. Just by wearing the mask. If everybody would wear the mask, there's a piece of magic for you.
Right.
If everybody would wear the mask, this would all be over. Magical. Boom. See? Simple solutions. It's all very easy. Wear the mask and we will all be out of this. And if you're not wearing a mask, then you're prolonging the situation. See, it's all or nothing. Either or, all or nothing. Distorted thinking.
Right. It's just an inability. And then with the ingrainment comes, you have to do what the authority figure, the parent figure says, or else you're a bad person. And so it's just easier to model your belief system based on the authority's belief system. That's the magic that's happening. Instead of making a decision for yourself.
Yes, you have to do it. See, those phrases, have to, had to, are demonstrating an image of inferiority, a one where a person has no power of choice. I have to do this. There's no choice. So when we don't have choices, that means somebody is somebody is subjugating you to their theory. You see, freedom of thought comes with choices. The more choices I have, the freer I am. I don't have to make you fit my theory.
Right.
But when people try to subjugate you to their theory, again, going on to social media about the lockdowns, some of the statements people are making, they try to make the person with whom has made a valid challenging point of these rules, and they try to make it appear that this person has made a huge error in judgment. Now, that is projection, because
Right.
those same people cannot produce evidence of their debate. And when challenged to do so, rather than providing the information, they give you some magical way out, a name, a label. They begin to no longer attack the problem, but you, the person with
Right.
whom they cannot defeat.
Well, this is what's been most fascinating to me, I think, at this point in the whole thing, is that I don't even want to argue with people anymore. Like I don't, this is what I believe. Why is it that big of a deal? I'm not hurting anyone, you know?
Yeah,
If you want to wear a mask or self isolate or deal with it in your own way, that's fine. But we all have our own different opinions, and we all take care of ourselves the way that we feel is best for us. And that's what's so amazing to me, is that everyone wants to think, oh, the authority has said if we all do this, then everything's going to be all right. And then when you don't go along with what the authority is saying, because you're witnessing, the 10 million people that are in poverty here in the United States because of the lockdowns, or the 30 to 40 million people on the verge of evictions, and you're saying, this is horrible. Why are we doing this when we're not getting a lot of progress on the coronavirus front? We need to be flexible and not be so self-destructive. It seems to me like the society as a whole is actually engaging in self-destructive behavior here. And if individuals were just responsible, I mean, I am taking zinc and vitamin D, and I think the science tells me that I have a very minimal chance of becoming symptomatic even if I acquire the virus, and it's been working for me. And I don't want to argue with somebody else.
well,
They want to
okay, so
argue about zinc, like, I don't care what
right,
you feel like doing. This is what I'm doing.
you just triggered another piece of magic. I didn't want to get into this, but since it's available,
Hmm.
asymptomatic people don't spread the virus. There's never been a time in history
Right.
where an asymptomatic person has caused another person to get the virus. So there's more magic for you that they have pumped into their propaganda schemes. And again, the magical thinker takes us to face value, questioning nothing. And again, this kind of thinking is then used to justify a $380 billion deficit. Well, they've spent all this money because they've needed to protect citizens,
Yeah.
is the rationale.
Oh, I mean, here in the United States, looking like 4 trillion or something. The amount of money that they're spending now is outrageous.
Well, you guys have 10 times more people than we do. So,
Sure, sure.
yeah, you can see the number exponentially growing in that regard. So this all or nothing belief system that these magical thinkers have, and remember, this comes from childhood, this comes from shame-based socialization,
Uh-huh.
where your ideas are found to be flawed and defective repeatedly. Flawed and defective repeatedly. That's important to note, because every single person on Facebook that sees anybody going against what they believe to be right and true automatically stamps you with these labels, these all
Right.
or nothing thinking labels. And this is a way for them to solve their problem and remain in diluted control.
Right. And so I mean, I guess we could even wrap it up. We're trying to keep these short and sweet. But the
Yeah.
idea is here that you're raised as a child, if you're raised in what I call a patriarchal culture, and then, as I've alluded to a couple times in our previous conversations, even the way that we're taught in school, it teaches us this kind of ingrainment. The teacher tells you this is the truth. You get an A if you regurgitate it. You get an F if you fail. And then at home, though, in the home, everybody's going through this as well. If you don't do what your parents tell you, you get in trouble. You may get even swatted. You may get sent to your room. You're certainly likely to get shamed if you don't do what you're told. And this becomes ingrained in our psychology, so that even as we become adults, rather than individuating, making choices for ourselves, following our heart path, doing what we choose, feeling comfortable doing what we choose, we're always looking for that authority figure to tell us what to do. When the authority figure tells
And
us what to
looking
do,
for
it
approval.
triggers. Right. It
Yet,
triggers this need for approval. You have to do what you're told, or else you're going to get put into your room. Even though you're an adult, these are the emotions that you're feeling because you're so used to it, or you're going to get that failing grade.
why is the person doing this? Remember, the magical thinking as it relates to the lockdown and why people are obedient and why they believe that authority figure. This is one psychological canvas that people play out their magical thinking on. It is not the coronavirus or the lockdowns that actually caused the magical thinking to begin with. It is just simply another venue, if you like, where
Hmm.
people will play this magical child out on the psychological stage of life. But there is a real reason that people, and we're going to get into this in the next episode, of course, but there's a real reason that people are still relying on magical thinking. And remember, they're not aware of this, but when we bring it forward, what we're talking about is the wounded child inside is still yearning for fulfillment. They're still trying to
Absolutely.
complete, they're unfinished, but that fulfillment is not negotiable. And therefore, the magical stage of life is a very necessary way station for that wounded child and later the adult to figure out, how am I going to advance to the next level of the game of life using my magical thinking to help me to reconnect with the awareness that I should have obtained in childhood.
There you go. So it's the childhood abuse that keeps people thinking that when the authority figure is telling them something, even after months of it not working, they're still going to try to believe magically what the authority figure is telling them because they think that if they can please that authority figure, then they get that validation, that fulfillment that they didn't get as a child when they were being raised in this system that perpetuates this trauma bond with the authority figure. I mean, this patriarchal system, as I would describe it, and you describe it more in terms of the family relationships. But this is just the thing. It's just so fascinating that we can take the way someone's raised within the family, and then it explains why so many people now, as adults, don't have the capability, the flexibility to change with what's going on, to accept the new information. Maybe it doesn't come from the corporate media or the government. Maybe it comes from the alternative media or peer-reviewed science that's not being promoted in the corporate media, but it's there. You see a peer-reviewed paper, somebody shows it to you. You should incorporate that into your worldview, make the decisions for yourself. But instead, you're not looking for the right answer for yourself. You're looking for fulfillment from the authority figure, even when you have to stretch the imagination into the world of magical thinking to believe that if we just lock down harder, the problem will go away because that's what the government, the authority figure is telling me. And if I do what they say, then I get that validation that I didn't get when I was a child. It's pretty fascinating, really.
Correct. And in that instance, they feel fulfilled for a moment. They
Right.
feel fulfilled. They have satisfied something. Now, let's just quickly go back to the baby elephant, adult elephant theory with the rope, if you remember this, where the little elephant has tried numerous times to get away, and he is tethered with a large rope. But after so many attempts, the baby elephant ceases any further attempt to extricate himself from this rope and be free.
Right.
Later, that same baby elephant who grows up to be an adult no longer needs a large rope to tether him. A little one will do the trick because that elephant now remembers all attempts in childhood. So he remembers that and continues to believe that, despite the fact he could escape with that little rope, no problem, but never
That's
attempts to do it because he's now ingrained the belief through the social process, through the obedient process, the authoritarian upbringing, and the demands placed upon that baby elephant are still ingrained in the minds of the adult who continues to obey the trainer.
Yeah, that's a great analogy right there. That really puts it all in a nutshell and makes it really easy to understand. And then it also,
Absolutely.
one thing that I was reminded of is this, that people feel like they're so virtuous. They feel like they're doing the right thing when they're telling you wear that mask, or stay 6 feet away from me. because they're getting that fulfillment that they didn't get in childhood, because they're thinking that if they're doing what the authority figure says,
This is the modern human rights system.
they'll finally get the fulfillment that they didn't have when they were 3, 4, 5 years old and not allowed the freedom to express themselves the way that they could have, you know?
This is the hallmark trait of the more than human self. I am righteous. I am perfect. I am virtuous.
Right.
And you are not. We are saved. You are not. What hubris. We wear the mask. You don't.
Right.
What
another example of magical thinking.
Absolutely.
Well, that sounds great, George. I think we better wrap it up. We're trying to keep these short and sweet, and I know we could talk for a long time, but what is going to be next week's episode 3, about? You want to give a little quick shout out about?
Well, next week we're going to delve into the yearning part of fulfillment.
Okay.
We're going to deal with part of the next level of magical thinking in mystification, fulfillment, and confronting the emptiness in this magical thinking. Because remember, when we're not living in reality, we're going to be on a constant, enduring, relentless search for it, whether we know it or not.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Sounds good, George. Well, thanks a lot for showing up today and having this conversation with me. We had a few technical issues, but I think we'll get the message across. I'll try to do the best editing job that I can. And I think that we'll be able to smooth most of this out. Our connection wasn't perfect today, so apologize for that.
Get us at The Line Media on Twitter, media at thelineinternational.com, and The Line Canada on Facebook.
Sounds great. And of course, you'll be able to find the whole series at theshiftnow.com. And you can check me out at The Shift with Doug McKenty on Facebook and YouTube at D McKenty on Twitter. And there will be links to get the whole series once we've got it out. This has been the second episode. So thank you again, George, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, Doug. Have a wonderful day.
You bet. You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.